Good evening and welcome to the Kansas City Public Library. I'm Henry Fortunato, Director of Public Affairs. Tonight we have a real treat in store for you. You know, most of us, I think, want to be winners. This is particularly the case if you have the audacity to throw your hat in the ring of electoral politics, and most especially if you are one of those self-selected few that think you have what it takes to be President of the United States. So when you want to be a winner, there's a natural tendency, I think, to want to be like other winners, to do what they did, to figure out what they figured out. But maybe there's another way to be a winner. Maybe the best lessons can be learned from the losers. Maybe in examining how the candidates who at one point seemed like sure things, but ended up being also-rans, offers far more in the way of instruction. That, in a nutshell, is one of the theses that Samuel Popkin presents in his new book, The Candidate: What It Takes to Win and Hold the White House. Indeed, a more accurate subtitle for this book, albeit a far less grammatical one, might be How Not to Lose a Presidential Election, or otherwise avoid being shown the door after your first term. That's because some of the most riveting analysis in this phenomenal new book is about the campaigns of three candidates who didn't make it. Hillary Clinton in the race for the Democratic nomination in 2008, George H.W. Bush seeking re-election in 1992, and Al Gore trying to succeed Bill Clinton in 2000. In each one of these instances, the deconstruction of these defeated candidacies is spot on, demonstrating a superb combination of political insight, management theory, and true insider knowledge. Coming from Samuel Popkin, this is no surprise. A PhD from MIT and a professor of political science at the University of California, San Diego, Dr. Popkin is not simply a scholar of note. He is also a serious practitioner in the art of electoral politics. He served as a consultant to the campaigns of George McGovern and Al Gore. Losers here, I'm seeing a pattern. As well as Jimmy Carter, all right, 50-50, and Bill Clinton in 1992. He's a master of polling and strategy and did a 7-year stint with the election units of CBS News, where he provided survey design and analysis. In his spare time, he's also served as a consultant to political parties in Canada and Europe, plus the U.S. Departments of State and Defense. The Candidate: What It Takes to Win and Hold the White House is available for sale, courtesy of our friends at Barnes & Noble, and Dr. Popkin will be signing copies following his presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Samuel Popkin.
First of all, it's like a fountain of youth to be in such an extraordinary library. And they said, come for the reception beforehand. I said, okay, but you need to hide me somewhere for 10 minutes before I come out here so I can look over my notes. And they put me in the special collection room. And I felt like a kid again in the library in Superior, Wisconsin. Or once, long ago, I got to spend some time in a special room in the New York Public Library. I think it was Barbara Tuchman's old distinguished family had donated the room. And you sit there and you know this is where probably Mark Twain did his work, or this is where Walt Whitman sat. And it was this, and yeah, I went in there. I hadn't been in something that felt like a Stax in so long, because now you're doing archives and PDFs and Google. And I spent an enormous amount of time reading documents from the Truman Library that I got online. I never even was in Independence, Missouri. And there was something extraordinary. I walked in here. The last time I was that excited walking in the library was when I took my little kids to Cambridge, England, and we had never, any of us, seen the Christopher Wren Library, and there was part of Winnie the Pooh on display. Now, the stacks in this building. I said, welcome to the Gilded Age. And they explained that this was one of the great buildings. And that's what makes St. Louis, Kansas City, Minneapolis, Chicago, such great cities. There were all these old families that knew give to the city, opera houses, symphony halls, libraries, banks. I mean, all we have in San Diego is Branch Bank Parthenon, we call these, these places. Now, I had a terrific time on the NPR radio today thinking about the book, and I hope I don't get too long because of it. I'm always getting longer when I get excited about the work in the campaign. But what really prompted this book, let's be honest, was the Al Gore campaign. That was one of the highlights of my life was the 1992 Clinton campaign. Perils of Pauline, some days getting Clinton prepared, I felt like when you watch Cat Ballou and they get Lee Marvin shaved and sobered up, and you go out there for one more fight, you know, and it was, or maybe it was Rocky IV, you know, and he'd be mauled, then suddenly he'd be out there and he'd just have it all together. And there was something magnificent about that brawl and overcoming this and that and all the great, and I mean, anytime you work with James Carville, I mean, I don't think people understand how smart that man is and how much I learned from hanging out in the bat cave, they called his apartment. But the Gore campaign was the opposite. There was just something that didn't feel right. And if anybody's had more than one child, you know that you start to get patterns and you have a sense. You know, there's a point at which you know the difference between an earache, hunger, and overtired. You know, so like the second child is easier than the first because you realize once they've had an earache, you know the difference and you don't panic when they cry or they wet their diaper or whatever. You just know this is part of the game. And my daughter has been married, we're waiting for the grandchildren we had her for. And they got their dog first. And my wife and I keep saying, thank God they got the dog first, because if they treat the child like that, it'll be a nervous wreck, you know. He soiled his kennel, is it gonna be okay? You know? But in campaigns, the same thing happens, and there was something wrong from day one in the Gore campaign. Something didn't seem right. I mean, I have an enormous respect for many, many parts of Al Gore, the person, and what he stands for, and when he takes an issue on, he gets it. But something about the campaign brought out the worst. And there was this lurching, erratic quality. Now, look, every campaign only has one winner. But there's a difference between losing and blowing it. You know, snatching over and over, snatching defeat from the jaws of victory. And when the campaign was over, I knew something was wrong from day one, and I took a lot of notes. And when it was over, I resolved, I am going to figure this out. I'm going to figure out how you do what the right strategy should be, or what the right team should be. And my first realization was that was the wrong question. That I met, most management consultants are sort of snake oil, like political geniuses who claim to know it all. But one of them had a puzzle in the book, and I translate the puzzle in my book as, suppose I called one of you up and said, I'm giving you the most amazing trip of your life. Pack a small suitcase, no more than 12 pounds. When you get to the airport and board the private jet, we'll tell you what the vacation is. Okay. Am I taking you on a safari? Am I taking you to Antarctica? Am I taking you to a ball in Paris? Are you going to be in Paris on the runway and you get to pick 3 gowns that you want when it's over? You know, do you want cold, warm, hot? I mean, are you going to go to Jerusalem and so you better have long skirts or you'll get stoned? Or are you going snorkeling with the dolphins? If you don't, well, that's what it's like to get ready to be a candidate. You start in advance and you build an identity and you get ready, and then the world changes. And I realized there was much too much emphasis on the candidates as heroes and goats, and not enough on the options their political party either gives them or takes away from them, and what they do to be agile. If you don't know where you're going, you've really got to adapt. When you start running for president, you don't know in 4 years what the Supreme Court will have done in the meantime. You don't know what the economy will be. Now, CEOs do that every day in real life. A CEO at GM is planning 4 years in advance the car that's going to come out. They don't know what the price of gas will be. They don't know if families are going to be getting bigger or smaller, if convertibles will be the rage, electric cars, hydrogen cars, natural gas. What is it you're going to want, and what are the competitors going to do? If you build carbon fiber and everybody else builds better carbon fiber, you're at the bottom of a pole. If you build the SUV that people want and everybody else builds a convertible, you win. Well, so CEOs do that, but the difference with the candidate is the candidate's the product. Nobody ever said the president of General Motors was a jerk because he changed his mind on convertibles. When GM long ago realized that catalytic converters would stop Volkswagen for 5 years, and they saw the light and decided that all cars in America should have catalytic converters, nobody said you're a rat for changing your mind on catalytic converters. But if you're the candidate, they do. When Jack Welch had affairs with the editor of the Harvard Business Review, nobody sold their GE stock. You know, Larry Ellison is doing very well at Oracle, and with his personal life, even after recent years, he would have a very hard time running for the Senate or the governor's mansion. I mean, Edwin Edwards in Louisiana used to say, I'm only in trouble if they get me with a dead girl or a live boy, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure that Larry Ellison would, I mean, I don't want to know the story. I don't want to know if the stories I hear about are true or not, and I have nothing against him or Oracle. He's a great sailor. But when I started looking at the issues, the really big thing that hit me fast was you can't talk about the perfect campaign or the perfect team. First of all, there are, there are 3 campaigns. No matter what people are doing, they are either a challenger, an incumbent, or a successor. And in my book, I show the statements made by challengers over the years, incumbents over the years, and successors, the person trying to hold the White House for their party. You can't tell some of the statements of Jerry Brown, Gary Hart, Barack Obama, and Thomas Dewey apart. They're the same themes, but it doesn't make it easy. It tells you how hard it is to pull off these themes, that they're there, but you have to make them fit. And they have, if this was a technical talk, somebody would say, well, this is asymmetric warfare. And I'm going to get right to the incumbents and the challengers, because what we have is a challenger from the out party and an incumbent seeking to hold the White House. And the military would call this asymmetric warfare. One side's got missiles and the other side's got sniper scopes. One side has IEDs, the other side has armor. This is not a chess game where you have a red set and a white set, or a white set and a black set. These are different tools, different weapons, different kinds of persuasion and images. It's not a matter of, and it's not simply one, it's always better to be the challenger, or it's always better to be the incumbent. They're just different. And which is a better hand to have depends on what's going on in the world around you. Imagine the 2008 primaries, if the bank crash had occurred in December of 2007, not in November 2008, you almost certainly would have had Mitt Romney versus Hillary Clinton as the candidates. Senator McCain never once learned how to even talk with his economic advisors. He just didn't have any interest, as we saw during the bank crisis when he tried to look relevant. And I mean, he couldn't. I mean, he just, for 8 years he'd been saying, I'm going to learn economics, and he never bothered. And think about the difference. A senator who knew Wall Street banking, had had experience talking with all these people for years, and somebody saying, we'll change the nature of the way we do business. There's a real crisis on hand. You're not about to change the nature of the culture. You want to just get a solution. And this happens over and over, that the system matters and you have to adapt. It's a little bit like poker. There's bluffing, there's the luck of the draw, and there's the information. And that leads me to what the military's, there's a military slogan I discuss at length in the book that the minute I saw it, I knew I had to make a big deal of it in the book. And the slogan is, planning is everything, the plan is nothing. And they mean by that, the more planning you do, the better you get at planning. But the minute the shooting starts, you have to redo your plan. You know, the equivalent is, excuse me, but this is football season. Maybe that's why, in fact, I study losers, because I'm a Chargers fan. Yeah. Sort of getting ready now for what I know will happen soon. You've already had the cold bath of reality here, you know, the cold shower. I'm almost irritated now when the Chargers do well at the beginning, because I know it's just going to take me longer to get back to normal life. But when the planning is everything, that means when you look at it's Romney's fault, or somebody has charisma, or he has no charisma, you're entirely missing the point. There's no such thing as charisma that's inherent in your psyche, your personality, or your brain. Some people are better looking, some people are more attractive, but charisma comes and goes. One of the most boring people alive for years was Gary Hart. Suddenly he was charismatic, then he went back to being boring again. Remember when Jimmy Carter in '76 was charismatic, and then in '80, not so charismatic. Whether or not you're charismatic depends on whether you're inspiring hope in people. When you're hopeful, then there's charisma. And what keeps you giving people hope, what keeps you going, is that when you run for president, you're one of the most audacious people around. It really, if I may quote a former president, it takes a lot of brass to get up there and say, I am ready for the toughest, most powerful job in the world. Today, I am ready. Then you have to go backstage and say, what's that country where the problem just occurred? Where is the Kingdom of Swat? Is that Pakistan or the Red Sox? You know, or what continent is Guyana? Is Kashmir in India or Pakistan? I mean, suddenly you don't know what you're going to have to know, and you have to be able to work with people. And there's a great rule I love almost as much as the military line in the book. It's the world according to Mike Tyson. When Mike Tyson was, before he became a biter, when he was the greatest fighter, at the period when Mike Tyson was the greatest fighter in the world, everybody was going to challenge him for their millions and hope to live would say, well, I got a strategy, I think I can beat him. And they'd ask Tyson, and his answer was always, everybody says they have a strategy till I punch them in the face. Well, that happens when you're a candidate. If you're audacious enough to run, you only stay agile and can adjust, and when you get knocked down, can get back up, if you have built the team. Bill Moyers once said, well, you know, it was in my day, men were men and they did it all themselves, like Kennedy and Johnson. And today, they just rent a team. If you've ever been in a room with Larry Summers and Richard Holbrooke, and the idea is, well, you could just rent them and it'll be easy, you know. You don't get a presidential team unless everybody there wants the ball for the last shot, or wants to run the ball, or wants their play called on the goal line, or wants their speech or their issue to be there. And so campaigns are actually much harder today. And Mitt Romney noticed after 2008, now there's never been, I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think any more successful businessman has ever run for president than Mitt Romney. After 2008, when he didn't do so well, he was with some of his friends from Harvard Business School where he excelled at the same time as law school, and he said, this is a lot harder than being a CEO. You just have to take account of so much more. And it is a lot harder, and it's the team you build. Now, let's get down to challengers and incumbents. This is all about two visions of the next 4 years and what has to be done. And it's which vision, it's not which vision just do you like more. It's does the person even mean it? And if they mean it, could they do it? And if they do it, would it be good for you? You know, so there's a sincerity issue, and there's a competence issue implicit. You know, you don't just, we get millions of commercials every day. I mean, you want to get rid of your cellulite, you want to have new bumpers, whatever it is, you're going to see the ads. And so you're used to screening out the difference between cheap talk and something you're willing to believe. And this is the job of the candidate. They really have to show you something they want would work and that they mean it. And it's always there, their credibility issue. And part of credibility is, do you believe in them? And part of it is, or do you believe in the party? It's this complicated mixture of what they stand for and what the party stands for. And this year we see the variations on the eternal themes of the challenger and the incumbent. The ideal challenger is an experienced virgin. Now, I know that that's a contradiction, but a lot of love and romance and infatuation is contradictory. You want somebody that's pure and means what they say all the time, and you want somebody who's experienced enough to wade through the swamps and clean up the mess. Good luck. But in 1980, when people were so unhappy with the choice between Governor Reagan and President Carter, that there were all these fantasies, if only X would run, if only Y were alive. And somebody had this wonderful proposal in the New York Times. The perfect candidate would be Yoda from Star Wars. He's wise, he's experienced, he's pure, he's skilled in combat, and he's not only not tainted by Washington, he's from out of the solar system. So the perfect candidate. It turned out when I researched that to use it in the book, the person who drew Yoda made sure it had a few of the features of Albert Einstein. If you look at the Yoda stamp, which I never got around to getting permission to use in the book, and I regret it. If you look at the Yoda stamp the government issued, there's a certain Einsteinian freaky hair quality to him. Now, let's look at what we've got now. Let's look at Governor Romney. This is a competent man. I do not think Governor Romney has run a very good campaign. And it's not, and I'm not saying that because I happen to be a Democrat all the way. I'm for Obama, but I'm not giving an Obama talk. I'm giving I mean, a doctor knows they want the cancer to lose and you to win, but they have to be honest when they look at it. I'm being analytic. This is a competent man who's had a lot of trouble. In 2009, he looked like a very tough candidate to beat. He had gone against the bailout of Detroit on the grounds that if you don't get the unions to cooperate, it's going to be a money sink. And he wrote a famous op-ed in USA Today. Obama should get over the notion of a public option in his health care, and then he'll have the perfect plan, just like mine. Okay, so Obama drops the public option, not because Governor Romney suggested it, but because it was a no-starter. It's something of one of the Democrats' fantasies that it'll work so well. But so Obama has health care. Romney was all set to run as Obama's health care plan plus business smarts. And then the Tea Party. Oops. And so now he has to go through the primaries, and he's being attacked from the right with super PAC money behind all sorts of candidates who couldn't possibly make it. Governor Perry, Michelle Bachmann, Newt Gingrich. And all they can agree on is the front runner has to die for them to do something. You know, Michelle Bachmann, Rick Perry, Newt Gingrich, Rick Santorum, I don't know that if you put the four of them together, you could get much agreement on anything. But they're there to go after Mitt. That's not new. Every front runner gets knocked around. Bill Clinton took gas. Al Gore, everybody gets beat up. But that's where how you handle it works well. And there are two ways you handle it when you want people to trust you despite some doubts about a program. Part of it is your moral firewall. You have to have, if people really believe in you. Did I do that? No. I don't do that tune. When you have a strong fiber, if you've got the Congressional Medal of Honor, nobody questions whether you do everything for money or not. You know, even when they were saying John Kerry didn't deserve the Silver Star, they didn't say he did it to pad his resume. You know, he did not drive that PT boat into the communist machine gun nest to say it'll look good on my resume that I took out a machine gun nest with a new PT boat maneuver. That was just not a career move, I don't think. And if you've done something selfless like that, it helps. Or if you've done some stunning thing for the world, if you've invented the Salk vaccine, there's a certain sense of you're not just out there to make money. Well, if you're really wealthy and you're from the Church of the Latter-day Saints, you've got a problem. Okay, I'm Jewish. I didn't know until 2008 that many people in America think the Latter-day Saints are a cult, not a religion. I thought a Christian was a Christian. Oops. We have so many very, very talented Mormon students in graduate school because when they've traveled the world and done their missions, they come home and or like John Huntsman, who was a very, very good ambassador to China that worked very closely with my wife, who runs an institute and was in charge of China under Clinton, who is my wife, the professor, worked with him on some energy issues, and you know, he got interested in China because he was a missionary in Taiwan and he's fluent in Chinese. So I didn't know that was a problem. But it's an even bigger problem that you're wealthy. A recent Pew Center for the People in the Press survey, and those are surveys that are like the gold standard. You can all look at the Pew website and not worry you're being spun by anybody. Those The Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and the Washington Post are the 4 sets of surveys I advise everybody to look at so they don't get ulcers when they listen to the crap surveys. And Pew asked people what they thought about the wealthy. On the very positive side, as we've always known, they're considered smarter and harder working than most people. On the other side, they're considered far more greedy and not quite so honest. But the big one is they're different. You know, as Hemingway said, the rich are different, they have more money, but it's an issue of, do they understand you or they like you? And I've been very surprised, very frankly. Aesthetically, I'm not sorry because I want President Obama to get reelected, but I was stunned aesthetically that somebody by 2008 didn't close their Swiss bank accounts, their Cayman Island accounts, at a time when you then have the lingering, you got a lot of trouble for not simply getting that issue off the table. I mean, you just get rid of that issue. You know, it's as puzzling to me as why the sons told the dog story. I mean, I've never gotten over that. The only reason you know that Governor Romney once put the dog on the roof is his kids thought that was a story that would humanize their father. I've never figured that out. Now, he's had a very clear line from day one on President Obama, and it was very well done. Like it or not, I thought it was very well done. He talked about, first of all, he said, Obama is not working. And then he said, too many European ideas, too much time in the faculty club. That's good. Come on, if you're gonna go after the Obama, you need the votes of the Obama haters, just like Stevenson said, we need more than the intellectuals. You need more than the tolerant. You need the intolerant to have a vote, you need their votes in both parties. And so this is better than some of what's been said. And the implication is clear without saying anything overt. It's not Lee Atwater, it's gentlemanly. And then he says he doesn't understand business. Fair, he's never been a businessman. Never, and a lot of businessmen who have met with him feel he's not very sympathetic. And that all makes sense. But the problem for Governor Romney is not his business sense, but he has been hit by the same attacks on Bain Capital since 1994 by Edward Kennedy, and to my astonishment, to this day, has still not said what I learned at Bain other than hard work and planning. You know, there's a section in my book for challengers called Righteous Rectification. You were anti-involvement with the United Nations, and now you've seen the light and you're for it. You have to explain how your principles and values are the same, but changes in the world cause you to change your opinion. People every day in the 60s and 70s changed their opinion about segregation without looking like they were just following the polls. They said, people woke up to something they were then ashamed they didn't see, or they realized it was worse than they thought, or they realized the times had changed. And that very much happened this last year or two on gay marriage, among other issues, and several others. And Governor Romney in the primaries got stuck a lot. When he would get hit with these attacks it was obvious from day one that he was the one who had the staying power. You notice Senator Santorum pulled out the day before the Pennsylvania primary, his home state, because to know him is not to love him, and in Pennsylvania, he actually got the lowest poll rating when he was in office of any American senator of the last 20 years. And that's from a colleague whose specialty is House and Senate. He's a one-note person, and the one note sells well for a while against the Mormon, but it doesn't wear. And instead of grinding him down, Romney kept saying, "Oh, I'm against contraception too." And he got stronger on immigration, not weaker. And he got stronger against Obamacare. And he got stronger against a sane budget resolutions. He got so far over that he had no choice but to put Congressman Ryan on the ticket. Now, it was a very smart choice for him to choose Congressman Ryan. It was not a bold choice in my analysis. It was smart because he was wedded to Ryan, but if Congressman Ryan were not on the ticket, his goal in life would be to preserve his standing as the leader of the right-wing Tea Party group, of the anti-tax group, because that's his ticket to being head of the Republican Party in Congress someday, to be the next John Boehner when Boehner gets knocked off. That's his way of jumping ahead of Eric Cantor and being the new darling of the party. Okay, now that he's on the ticket, his goal in life is to get to the White House, not to get to be Speaker. That's much better for Mitt Romney than, well, it's better to have him inside the tent pissing out than outside pissing in, as I put it in online. That you can read my analysis of that online with James Fallows at Atlantic.com. We've been doing a series of Ask Dr. Popkin, and he sets up a question, and I talk about the pick or the bane or the gay marriage. And this is the year, well, let me talk about President Obama, and then we'll get back to the conventions. I hope I'm not running too long. Oh God, well, I'm gonna go in 10. I got the 5-minute signal, and I got at least 10. Tell him I can go longer, please. Okay, thank you. You paid for this microphone, but I'm not gonna get up. I like this building. I mean, I'm not gonna, Okay. Now, let's talk about the playbook of the incumbent. Things aren't good, so no matter what goes on, this could be last man standing. So let's not assume that all the clumsiness in the world has taken Governor Romney out of this. President Obama is definitely, I can't imagine a political strategist I've ever met who would say, I could make more money playing Romney's cards than Obama's today. 2 years ago, I can imagine a lot of people saying, give me Romney and we'll take it over anybody Obama has. Not today, after the way things have been handled well by the president, and not so well by Governor Romney. If you're the president, your basic line, whatever you say, is don't change horses in the middle of the stream. I'm the only president you got. Finish the job. When he says forward, which that's what we do on email, but when he says forward, the point of this not so apt slogan is you can't turn back to those losers. Or as Governor Clinton very well put it, he didn't fix our mess in 4 years, so fire him and bring us back, is the Republican argument. They're saying he didn't make everything we messed up better, so you got to get rid of him and let us do it more of what got us in trouble. And that's staying the course. But if you want to stay the course, you've got to be convinced it's a good course. And if you don't want to change horses in the middle of the stream, well, are we in the middle yet? Are we ever going to get across? Is he even taking the right path across the stream, or is there a big hole in front of us that's going to get deeper? And the argument now is you've got no choice. And he's now doing a very well, now it's getting a better version of the incumbent playbook. The single best thing, the basis, and I learned more studying the Truman Dewey campaign about the real dynamics than the others. I was fascinated with what a brilliant, dynamic person Dewey was and how well the Truman campaign killed him in Washington. It wasn't Harry Truman giving him hell on the campaign trail, because Harry Truman was such a poor speaker, very few people knew what he was saying. I mean, that's true. I mean, there was a poll asking people, you know, who do you consider a more dynamic speaker, Dewey or Truman? And it was 40 to 12. I mean, Henry Wallace was close to Truman. They had so much trouble finding a way for Truman to be able to be understood. They tried putting one sentence on every page, but when he turned the pages, they made so much noise. You know, they finally worked these staccato little sentences. And what the playbook, though, is it starts with, you've got divided government. You're the president, and the guerrillas have captured Congress. I don't mean guerrillas in an animal sense. I mean like the guerrilla fighters. The Che Guevara has got Congress, or Newt Gingrich. Or in 46, it was the Republicans that came in and said, we're going to cut taxes 20%, eliminate the deficit. We're going to start every day with a prayer and end it with a subpoena. That was 1946. You may have thought you've heard those lines since from both parties. Let's be fair here. When a party has the Congress and they have the White House, you subpoena, you challenge, you block, it's hardball. It's contact. It's a contact sport. And the president, no matter as they learned on day one, they're a commander-in-chief with 17 Senate votes. And by that I mean, if they really want a bill to pass, it only takes 51 senators. If they don't want it, it takes 67. They're the difference between an override and a majority. And they're the commander-in-chief. And they've got presidential directives if it's played very well. And if Romney is asking you for a leap of faith based on his business experience and his party and the love you have for Congressman Ryan, or the respect, he's got a lot of fans. If you are going to make the leap of faith, he wants you to look before you leap. And he can't say the economy is better than you think it is. You know the price of gas. You know friends out of work. It's 30 weeks or 30 months it's gotten some new jobs, but do you believe it's going to end well? That's like a Rorschach test. It's a gut check for everybody, and it's not an objective answer. But what he can do as president is remind you of the things that you already got that you're going to lose if they come in and keep their promises. Pre-existing conditions. Immigration status for people who were raised and educated in America. Civil union support, no more vetoes, no Defense of Marriage Act. Now, these are very powerful for some, and they all have a negative side. If they were free, and we'll make blueberries the national fruit, probably the other side would say, well, we're going to keep it. Or we agree to have, urge all children to brush their teeth more often. I looked at all the incumbent promises, and everybody says we're going to raise educational standards. Yeah, that's one of those easy ones. We're going to have more jobs. So the question is, what have you got that you're going to lose? And you're the commander-in-chief. Contrast President Obama's 2 trips to Afghanistan. 2008, shooting baskets, signing autographs. 2012, shooting bin Laden, signing a treaty. Think about the difference. You know? And guess what? There's two things where Mitt Romney took a side, and now it's a difficult side. As to quote the subtlety, to invoke the subtlety of Vice President Biden. Bin Laden dead, General Motors alive. That's two. And Mitt was trying to distinguish, Governor Romney was trying to distinguish himself from Senator McCain in 2008, when Senator McCain was to track him to the end of the world no matter what it takes, and Mitt said, well, I don't think that's cost effective. I think he might have been right, but it misses the whole point of how people feel about it. I mean, you might as well have told the Israelis, don't go get Eichmann because it's going to cost a lot of trouble. You know, you just don't do things. Mistake. Now, so the other part of it is really this line, you know, James Carville's famous line was, the economy's stupid. That was smarter than I ever thought at the time, because it wasn't just a matter of getting the press to think about the economy. It was getting them to feel stupid if they talked about social issues. It's the economy, stupid. Yeah, well, what about social issues? It's the economy, stupid. This is the first time the social issues have been on the Democratic side. The Republicans are calling immigration now a wedge issue. They, you know, as if there's never before had there been wedge issues like race. Gay marriage used to be a Republican wedge issue. Suddenly, social change. Before he died, I spent a lot of time with a Republican I really respected, Robert Teeter, who'd been pollster for George Romney, Nelson Rockefeller, Richard Nixon, George Bush Sr., even some work for Reagan. And he said he'd never in his lifetime seen anything change as fast as attitudes about homosexuality. You know, it's extraordinary how many people just say, well, why not? I mean, it's somebody, one of the extreme cage fighters of Massachusetts had endorsed Scott Brown and then had a press conference and said, I didn't know he was against gay marriage. Everybody should be allowed to marry. And here's somebody who looked like an Oakland Raider, you know, with the big, you know, tattoos and the muzzle thing. Well, everybody should have the right to marry. What's wrong with him? You know, and that's a different world than nobody expected it. Frankly, President Obama was very lucky, because nobody knew that this was the time when the whole issue was going to collapse and nobody was going to stand up and say, you can't do it. The Republicans just sort of whined about it. And the same thing happened when the president issued an administrative directive, not even an executive order, on immigration, which was simply, here's the administrative priorities. A few Republicans said, that's unconstitutional, how dare you? We're going to overturn it. And they couldn't muster the votes in Congress to put it out there to overturn it, because it's so divisive within the party. That's as divisive as the issues of African Americans and crime and welfare were for the Democrats in the 70s and 80s. It is a divisive issue between the people who are afraid of the others and people who welcome the voters in their state and want them. 30 or 40% of the Hispanics in America would be Republicans if it weren't for immigration issues. That's what it used to be before the Republicans took the small town, I'm afraid of them line, as opposed to give George W. Bush and Jeb Bush credit. Their attitude is, if you're in America, you should be educated and speak English and go to college. And that's what you have to do if you're in Texas or California. And Florida's going that way. Now, the conventions showed us the worries, and I will bring it close for questions. The conventions showed us the worries that are dominant in the campaigns, and they're so different. I didn't know what the deep Republican polls were saying until I sat there semi-religiously and watched much of the Republican convention. Phyllis Schlafly was ecstatic. She said it's the most conservative platform in history. But nobody talked about the platform endorsing the Arizona immigration laws at the convention. And nobody even raised gay marriage. There's states where it's anathema, but you can't win a national election if you're against some sort of reasonable rights for gay couples, and the children are turning out fine. So, and you can't possibly say, and if I'm president, I'll make it harder for women to get contraception. As we know so well in this state. This is the kind of thing, there's something like this every campaign. You never know which side is going to get the gift that keeps on giving. I mean, you just never know. I've been on both sides of this. I have been on both sides of it, and it's so nice when I'm on the benefit side as opposed to the, oh my God, they did what? The conventions felt reversed this year to me. Republican conventions are usually flag, patriotism, the country, and there's a unified theme of what we're going to do going forward. But if, excuse me, if you, whatever party you're in, if you watched Senator Chris Christie or you watched Marco Rubio, there was a very strong, not quite, it was like, I remember one year, long ago, somebody said to Barney Frank, "Are you still a Democrat?" And it was one of these years, he said, "Yes, very still." And it was a little bit like that. Chris Christie said, we're real men, we're tough, we don't duck the hard ones. But there were no hard ones in the speech that he wanted. The only villain at the entire Republican convention that was named as a name besides President Obama was the teachers union. The teachers union was beat up in a lot of speeches, pro-choice, charters, they're the bad people. That's about all you heard about it. And you've seen now and you've seen the problems Governor Romney's had in the last few days with the health care. The fact is, I don't think it is humanly possible to guarantee the pre-existing condition coverage without a mandate. That's why the Heritage Foundation said the only way to avoid single payer is to have a mandate. And you can go to YouTube and watch Governor Romney bragging at the Heritage Foundation about his plan and why it's exactly what conservatives all should be for, because of that. So there's a problem. It looks clearly like the people who are trying to keep the pre-existing conditions are more motivated than the people who hate the mandate. It looks like the passion is on the side of keep the coverage, keep the health care, and the argument that it's just taking money from deserving older people and giving it to undeserving people who just crashed the party is not gaining enough purchase. Now, as I close, you see that the support for Obama now, you're seeing in the campaign from Republican governors who want to brag about how well they've done in the last few years in terms of we've built jobs despite everything. Now, they actually asked the governor of Florida to quit bragging about how well the economy is doing for the sake of the Romney campaign. And there's now a big story at Politico, or no, actually in the New York Times, in the magazine, about how Obama is making the Republican governor of Ohio look good, and he's not taking on Obama and saying Obama didn't help me. He's not saying I'd do better with Romney, bring in Romney to take away the help I'm getting. This is, I mean, it's the governors in every party. When things get in trouble, you watch them. And the thing to keep your eye on now that I'm watching looking forward is, when do the super PACs start putting their money into Senate races and abandon the presidential race? Or what states do they do what? That's when we'll see the real state of the opinion polls. President Obama has 5 ways to get to the White House, to stay in the White House. Governor Romney has one very, very difficult way. So now I'm getting the signal that they're going to yank me if I don't stop for questions. So thank you very much.